Hey everyone, Julian here again. Welcome to nearly the beginning of week 4 of the course. 40% of the way through, well, 30% of the way through, almost 40. So congratulations, you made it this far, and congratulations also for having finished your first major writing assignment, the critical reading response paper. Um, I've left the comments on those papers, as you will have seen, I'm sure, on the papers that you submitted. So look over those very carefully because my comments are going to give you a good idea of how you did and what you still need to improve on as we continue developing your writing skills for the quarter. This video is going to cover a number of things, 5 things to be precise. So I'm just going to go through those one by one. The first thing that I'm going to cover is the individual meetings that we're going to have at the end of this week. You're going to see under the assignments for Monday that you're going to sign up for a time slot at some point, either on Friday morning or Saturday, this coming Saturday. So you're going to check that out. You're going to sign up. The first person who does it is going to copy and paste into the discussion the overall time schedule and fill in their name, and everyone is then going to copy the one before and fill in their name for the time that they want. So that's subject number 1. Number 2 for this week is the paper, the next major writing assignment that you're going to do, which is due at the end of week 7, and that's the RA, or the rhetorical analysis paper. I bring this up now really early because pretty much everything that we're going to be doing over the course of the next few weeks, including the presentation, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, is going to be building towards this rhetorical analysis paper. Now this paper is related to, but crucially a little bit different from, the last paper that we did, which was basically a paper based around the idea of close reading or critical reading. The RA, the rhetorical analysis paper, is also going to involve a lot of close reading, but crucially is also going to be interested in another kind of facet of reading, which is historical or cultural context. So instead of just doing close reading, as we did in the first short paper, you're also going to be dealing with the kind of cultural, historical context from which the text that you're going to be writing about, films, also The Long Goodbye, emerged. So we're going to talk more about what that actually means, but you do get a sense that this is going to be a slightly different sort of paper and is going to involve a kind of a little bit of broader research to build up a background for your ability to establish the historical, cultural context out of which some of those genre conventions that we've been talking about emerged. So I'm going to, again, cover that in more detail in the weeks to come, but that's just to give you an idea. This paper is 6 to 7 pages, as opposed to just 3 or 4 pages. So you're going to have a lot more content, and it's also that content is going to be different. It's going to be dealing with historical and cultural context of the text in addition to just the sort of genre conventions that we discussed in the last and covered in the last paper. Okay, number 3, so 1 was the individual meetings, 2, the RA for week 7. Number 3 are the presentations that are coming up. Now these presentations are actually very important in terms of building towards the RA in week 7. So you're going to see that one of your assignments for Thursday is to actually discuss with a small group that I've established on Canvas. You'll see you should be slotted into a particular group, and if you haven't been and that doesn't work, that's probably my fault technologically, so let me know. But you should be assigned a group, and you are then going to, with that group, discuss and figure out which of you is going to take which of the 4 topics that's listed under that assignment. Now those 4 topics are the history of pulp fiction magazines, the history of film noir as opposed to literary noir, so as opposed to just noir in books, stories, and novels, um, the history of how that migrated into film. Um, the third is going to be about gender politics in the context, the historical context of that time period, and how the sort of male figure of the detective and the female figure of the femme fatale, say, fit into the sort of male female gender roles that were established at that point in time, sort of in the 40s and 50s when these texts were being made, produced. And the fourth topic then is going to be the diction, slang, and the idioms that a lot of these texts, written and filmed, include. Um, so I'll go over those just really briefly to give you an idea of what kinds of things I'm looking for in these presentations. The presentations, in fact, are going to be, as I mentioned in week one, videos that you're going to make, just like this, in which you individually are going to present one of these topics, become an expert, and then present one of these topics to the other people in your group. So you're going to become the sort of class expert on one of these subjects. And then subsequently, the other people in your group are going to comment and discuss your video, or your presentation in the discussion groups. So what do I kind of mean by these things? Well, let's take the history of pulp fiction magazines. Arson Plus, which we read for already in week one, was first published in a magazine called Black Mask, which was one of the main kind of pulp noir magazines that published many of these stories, these original noir stories. So you might say, talk about the history of Black Mask and these other kinds of magazines. How did they emerge? Who was behind them? Who published them? Who were the readers of these magazines? How did these magazines relate to other literary magazines that were being published at the time? Did the critics respect the work that was being published in these magazines? Did they critique it as mere genre fiction or less than the other kinds of literary fiction? Who was publishing in these magazines? Those are the kinds of questions that someone doing that topic might cover in the presentation. The second one is the history of film noir as opposed to literary noir. Again, what you're going to want to talk about is the historical context and the way that these stories and novels were adapted by and transformed into films. So how did that happen? What was the process? Was it directors who saw the possibility for a large market to transform these into films? How did that process happen? Did people, in fact, who had written books become screenwriters for these films, as was the case with Raymond Chandler, for instance? You'll talk about sort of the cultural context behind that. For gender politics, the third topic, you're going to want to talk about, as I just mentioned, sort of what were the kind of male-female roles that dominated society at the time that these stories were written. And how does the sort of image of the hard-boiled, masculine detective, like Philip Marlowe, how does that relate to the kind of image of the gender roles of the man at the time when this book was written? Similarly, the femme fatale, this seductive female figure that so many of you wrote about in your papers. How does she relate to the kind of image, female image, that was current in the culture of the time period when these noir novels were being written or films were being filmed? It's the kind of questions you might ask there. For the fourth one, the diction, slang, idioms that run through all of these books, the sort of use of strange language that you probably have to kind of look up in dictionaries and find out their meanings. What are the history of some of these terms? You might look at some of the actual terms. Say a very common one. We talk about the private dick, right? Meaning the private detective. How did that term emerge and become common currency and was used in these novels or in these films? You might also kind of look up other terms, say racial terms that are used in The Long Goodbye. What is the relationship between Raymond Chandler's use of those terms and how those terms were used in the culture and history of the time? So that's some idea of what these presentations are going to include. If you have questions about that, of course, just let me know. But you're going to want to sign up for those by Thursday in your group, and then by the end of week 5, you're actually going to film and present on one of these topics yourselves. Okay, so we covered, let's see, individual meetings, we covered the RA, we covered presentations. Now we're going to cover briefly the assignments for this week. The first one for Monday is the process reflection, which you'll see this is going to be a really useful assignment, since really what it's doing is preparing you for what you're going to do for the final portfolio at the end of the quarter. And that process reflection at the end of the quarter is going to be very important in terms of the final grade that you get. So this process reflection, in which you're going to think about what it was like to write this first paper, what you did well, you think, what you could have done better, reflect on some of the individual approaches that you took. This is going to be really helpful preparing you to write that final bit for the portfolio, but the final reflection, which is going to be so important for your grade. Okay, and then we have the second assignment for Monday, are the writing workouts. As we've talked about, a writer does not simply emerge and become a good writer out of nothing. You have to practice writing well. And one of the ways you do this is through exercises. Sort of a basketball player shooting hundreds and thousands of free throws in order to practice. You got to do it again and again, exercise. So what you're going to do for this assignment is actually come up with your own writing workouts, your own exercises, that then in the coming weeks you're going to work on. The reason I haven't given you these is because each of you has individual things that are going to be particular to what you need to work on. So some of you might have had trouble kind of connecting paragraphs, say. So your writing workout, if that's one of your writing workouts, might be about writing, signposting your topic sentences and connecting them to the previous sentence, the last paragraph. How do you do that? If I commented in your paper on your CRRP that you needed to work a little bit more on, say, analyzing quotations, that might be one of the writing assignments, writing workouts that you come up with. If I commented structurally that your paper wasn't well organized, your writing workout might be, okay, create an outline for a paper. So these are just examples of things that you're actually going to come up with based on what you think you need to work on in your writing. You use my comments will be very helpful for creating that. Okay, let's see. Oh, for Thursday then, so those are the 2 Monday assignments. For Thursday, I've already covered the group discussion, in which you're going to decide who in your group will do what presentation topic, so you should do that by Thursday. The second assignment is to write about the Maltese Falcon, which, as you'll see on just below here, is one of your assignments is to watch this film, which I think you're going to love. It's a great and classic movie. So you'll see the assignment. You're also going to read an essay by Wexman about this film, and that essay is going to be really helpful too, because it's kind of a good example of what you're in fact going to do in your rhetorical analysis papers for week 7. So read that carefully. That's an A paper. So read that carefully and see how Wexman, how she does this, kind of builds up historical context and applies that to this film. While you're doing this assignment Thursday, and this is the last topic I want to discuss, one of the real things that I want you to focus on is the balance of summary versus analysis. Now, in the last kind of previous weeks, we've worked a lot on things like topic sentences, on signposting, where you are in the logic of your paper, the creation of a thesis, the use of concrete evidence in support of an argument, and all that. Now, in this assignment, I want you to pay special attention to the idea of summary versus analysis, because as I've noticed and probably commented on in a lot of your paragraphs and work, there's still this kind of confusion about, in some sense, there's too much summary and not enough analysis when you're analyzing a text. So what are these two things? Well, the way I like to think about it is summary is just the description of what the thing you're talking about or discussing includes. So, what happens in this novel, right? The plot, or what this character said, or, right, then the detective Marlowe went here, did this. So that's that's the baseline. You're going to have to do some summary when you're describing what happens in the film or what happens in the novel that you're writing about. But more important than summary, you're going to kind of want to do that as succinctly and quickly as possible. More important than that is what you are actually adding to a reader's experience of that text. And that's analysis. So the way I like to think about it is sort of if, let's say, I give you the text, right, the film that you're going to be discussing or the novel, that's like the block of stone that you're working with. Now, if you just hand me back the block of stone, right, you just summarized it. You haven't changed or added anything to my understanding of the text. So the analysis part is as if you were going to sort of carve out the stone and transform it into a kind of sculpture or statue. Um, you're adding something through your analysis. What are you teaching the reader that's more than just the summary of the text? And that's really what you want to focus on. Again, you're going to have to include some summary in all of your analytical writing. But really what you're going to want to focus on is what are you adding to a reader or a viewer's experience of the novel, story, or film that you're discussing. And that's what's going to happen through analysis. So in this assignment for Thursday, pay special attention to this idea of balancing out, achieving a correct balance, probably a little bit of summary, but then the majority of what you're writing is analysis, what you're bringing and adding to the experience of this text. Okay, that was a lot. I moved through it pretty fast, but those are the 5 main things that I wanted to cover. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. Send me an email. I'm always here. Try to send me one 24 hours in advance of anything, a response, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Keep in touch, and I look forward to actually speaking with all of you, hopefully by video, so we can see each other face to face on Friday and Saturday of next week. All right, until then, good luck. Let me know if you have any questions.